Hi everyone. Now welcome to our ACCA APM online intensive revision course. Now let me introduce myself. My name is Stephy. Now in this set of the online IRC video, it's possible for me to actually go through some of the very important topics with all of you and particularly for the upcoming examination. Now, so I believe that there's so many candidates out there that they have this perception that ACCA APM will be one of the most toughest and most challenging papers in the SP papers level. And that's what we call as the strategic papers. That's the class. Now, just to let you know that it's possible for you to make it through the exam, and that's when you have to know, number one, do well in terms of the time management part. So we'll talk about how to actually plan for the answer. For example, we mentioned that it's important in a way to know how long is the time required to spend on planning your answer. And then number two, it's important for you to know that the exam technique. For example, how not to throw marks in the examination, and what kind of the answers in terms of the quality the examiner is looking at. Now, so as a result, all these will then be covered in our upcoming session. Now, plus, so I have actually prepared you a list of the questions, and in total, it's going to be about 12 questions right here. That's for us to handle. Now, so we get to see some of the really important areas such as like performance, measurement too. Now with the use of the balanced scorecard, the building block model, the performance pyramid, so of course all these areas could then be seen in the past exam questions where we are going to attempt. Now so we find that class from here, we get to see that something that's more important right now on page number 2, where most of the ACCA APM candidates must know before they start attempting the questions. Now this is all about the examination format, and let's have a look. Now since currently students are still going for the paper-based examination, so the duration of the exam is going to be like 3 hours and 15 minutes. That's a class. Now that is equivalent to about 195 minutes in order for you to gain 100 marks. Now, of course, we know that the passing mark for this paper, or even any other of the ACCA exam papers, so we know that's going to be 50 marks here. Okay. Now, let's see, class, that the examination comprises of the following, and which we have the two. Number one, section A. Now, let's have a look at this section A here. Now, the section A here with one compulsory questions, and which is at 50 marks, and that's what you get to see. Now class, so when it comes to these 50 marks right here, now we know it comprises of two main areas, and which are the two main areas? Number one, now we're going to start off with section A, and this section A, that's going to be one question for your information. And that's only one compulsory question. And in order, class, now for you to draft the report for your information. Okay, now this is just one question we are seeing. Now bear in mind that, class, when it comes to this one question here, remember the 50 marks here with 46 marks. Now that's the first part of the question, which we find that is going to be part number 1 to part number 4. And bear in mind, class, that there may some of the subsections may carry 20 marks in total out of the 46. So later when we attempt the very first question in this set of the IRC pack, you could see that could be the first subsection, all right, to do with the evaluation of the performance report, and that comes about at 20 marks. Okay. Now, so this part number 4, we find that it's very much about the IT, all right? Now, so when I say IT area, we're talking about the MIS, or the Management Information System, or even you can see some areas in the syllabus to do with Burns and Scapin's framework, say for example, big data, or the use of data analytics. So all these fall under, right, the very first part of the question, which is of 46 marks. Now moving on, number 2. Now the second part here, that it comprises of 4 marks, and this 4 marks class, it's more on the professional marks to be awarded in the exam. Now these 4 marks is merely in section A but not in section B, for your information. Okay, so let's see. Now when it comes to these 4 marks, there's something we will have to take note, is that how can the student actually score the full 4 marks in the examination? Now that you see here. Now these 4 marks by itself, we mentioned that class is very much about the presentation of the report format as well as the structure. All right. Now, so that's what we are seeing here. Now, what is this report format and structure in order for you to score the full 4 marks here? Okay, let's see. Now, class, upon attempting section A question, now make sure you come out with all these: to, from, date, subject. Okay. Now, of course, we know that class in the question, they are all clearly stated that the report is addressed, right, to, for example, the board of directors of the company, right? That's going to be the first. Number 2, from the performance management expert, and that's on the second part. Now, when it comes to the date, of course, we can follow the actual exam date when you attempt the exam. And what about the subject? The subject-wise is more on like performance management issue at XXX company. Okay, so make sure all these has to be there. And of course, don't forget, when it comes to section B later, are you actually required to produce all these again? The answer is no, that's not necessary. Okay, now, so as a result, now we know in a way it's important to prepare the introduction para. Okay, now for example, now when it comes to the introduction, there's something you must know is, what are we going to include in this part of the para? Now class, it has to be a detailed para for the introduction. Okay, so what do I mean by detailed? For example, now we have just mentioned that we are required to cover 4 main parts in this exam question, and make sure in the introduction part here, the detailed area, which means it must touch and highlight on all 4 areas. Okay, so if let's say as part of the question, they are looking at the use of balanced scorecard, then of course in this intro para itself, we will then have to state that the use of balanced scorecard is discussed in this part of the report. So it must contain all the details from the subsection of the question. Now, so after the introduction para, it's important for you then to proceed to the next part. Now, by answering the question. Now, make sure the title or the heading must be there, and make sure no point form is allowed when you're here to write the answer. Okay, now class. But of course, in our session, when I produce the answer as part of the discussion, I will try to use the point forms, you know, for the sake of saving time, because we have to attempt multiple areas in the syllabus. And following by assuming the second part of the question, the third, and of course, at last, let's say number 4, let's assume you are required to produce the answer on the ROCE. Now class, now bear in mind that in your paper, that it covers more on theoretical aspect as compared to, okay, the calculation, or what we call as computational. Now we believe that the discursive area, or what we call as the theory part, represent nearly about 70% of the entire paper in the exam, and leaving a balance of 30% for the calculation. So as a result, in order for the students to pass this paper, now remember, number one, now do not over-focus or emphasize on the calculational area, or what we call as computational area. Now, because we know that that's a right strategy if it's for ACCA PM, performance management, which is the lower level paper, but not for APM. And as well as number two, class. Now, do not just, to read the study text. If you merely read the study text or to go through the study text and to go for the exam, I would say that it does not really help much. But somehow it's very much on the practice of the questions as suggested by the examiner, okay? As well as number three. Now, we know we are required to produce the workings in the exam. So bear in mind that, class, if that is the case, the students are actually required, say for instance, to come out with these. Okay, now where should the calculation be presented? Now, so in the exam, it is important for you to actually come up with the appendix. But watch out, class, because in the real exam question itself, we believe that a set of appendix, or sometimes more than one, will be provided in the examination. And therefore, what you guys will have to do is, if let's say in the exam question itself, appendix 1 and 2 have been provided, and you can actually create your own appendix A, say for instance. Now, so that's by presenting the calculation of the ROCE, and let's assume that we know this is to take PBIT over CE, which is the capital employed. And we know that, class, from here, assuming your answer is going to be 10%, and make sure, class, that when you are here to present your answer, so we're going to state the 10%, which is derived from the appendix A, okay? Now, so you will have to plan for your answer, for example, spacing, right? So that probably in terms of the body of the report will take up easily 3 to 4 pages, and make sure the appendix A will then be placed on the final page of the report. So it's going to be towards the end of the report here. That's a class. Now students start asking and say that, okay, Steffi, now we know this is going to be for our section A itself, and please share with us that the tips on the time management. Okay, class. Now, I will always see these as two different parts. For example, it's important for you to plan for the answer, and you will have to start attempting the question. So that's going to be two parts we are looking at. Now, class, when we talk about plan for the answer, I would suggest these to take up 10 minutes here. So the reason why we plan, because we know, class, if you fail to plan, that means you plan to fail. So to plan for the answer, which include you have to read the question and to plan accordingly. Now remember, class, you know, some of the candidates in the exam, they would probably go through the questions for more than just once. For example, they have to take time and then to read the questions for more than 3 times, sometimes as commented by some of your senior. Now, class, now let's see. If that's the case, I think by planning the answer, it serves the purpose. Okay, by how? Now remember, that's particularly important if, let's say, we're talking about when you read the questions, you will have to highlight the key points, and then by catching all the important data from the questions, and we know that has to be included as part of your answer. So we know that's going to be 10 minutes here. And remember, now since this is going to be 50 marks, and we know for every 1 mark, that's about 1.95 minutes. So let's come up with the calculation here. That's close to about 100 minutes. And this is 97.5 minutes in total. So 10 minutes is going to be planned. and the balance of close to about 88 minutes, or what I would suggest like 87 minutes, is for you to start answering this. Okay, now, so you should not spend more than 87 minutes in the first place just to answer your section A. You will have to move on. Okay, now, so this is all about section A, the very first part, where most of the time in the exam, they are trying to test on area on performance measurement. And that's why you can see some of the questions to do with the evaluation of the usefulness of any current measures or KPI set by the organization. And some other financial performance measurements areas, such as like the use of the ROI, okay, of the RI, all these will be seen important in section A. Okay, great. Now that's more on the first part. And what about section B? Now, section B, there'll be 2 compulsory questions here at 25 marks for each. Now, remember, now there'll be no options available to the students when it comes to section B anymore, but we know now the students are required to answer all the questions in the exam. So in total, you're required to answer 3 questions. Okay, so let's see. Now, for these 2 questions here, question number 2, question number 3, you could probably see areas from part A to part C, and it's rarely for you to see more than 3 parts of the requirement in the exam. So as a result, class, each of it, that's going to be 25 marks. Now, please remember, so for both question 2 and 3, we find that no appendix is required. Can you see that? Now, when they say no appendix is required, and what does it indicate? Now, that simply indicate that class from here, we are looking into all possible workings, if there's any, okay? Because sometimes like the students are required to calculate the EVA, or probably like any areas on transfer pricing, say for example. Now, so we said no appendix will be required to prepare in section B. Now, so all parts of your questions here, you can just come out with your answer entirely. And then subsequently, what we're going to see is that, of course, you can directly come up with that part of the calculation. So as suggested by the examiner, as well as the lead marker, right? We said working seems to be important, okay? Not just in the P level. I mean, not just in any other papers or even the F level, but in your APM as well. Now, class. Now, what about looking at the time management? Now, knowing that this is one of the main difficulties or the problem faced by the ACCA APM candidates. Now, let's have a look. Now, class, don't forget. Now, this is for each question, that's going to be like 25 marks. So taking this 25 times 1.95, and this is close to like 49 minutes for each. Now, so again, do not omit these 2 parts of the planned and the answer. All right. So this plan and the answer, class number 1, let's see. Now, since it's going to be like 25 minutes, you are still required to actually read and plan for the answer. But it's just that in terms of the case study, it could probably be like a page or 2. And therefore, class, you could probably see with 5 minutes, that should be more than enough for you to plan for it. So make sure you read or you plan. But I know that some students, they say, no, Steffi, I may probably spend more than 5 minutes just to read the questions. So you can actually adjust the timing itself. So if you find that you're comfortable with 10 minutes, then just fix it. All right, we fix at 10 minutes for the first part. Okay, now this is just a reference to you like leaving a 44 minutes here. That's for you to prepare the answer. So we get the C class. Now, most importantly, what I'm going to highlight here that's really important, it's when you plan for the answer. That's just too important. As you can actually see in our session, more exam tips or techniques would be shared, especially when we are here to attempt not just the section A as well as the section B question for your information. Okay, now so class. Now once again, now we know that for the students, in order to pass the APM, now we find that the normal reading of the articles will be important. So we know that there are plenty of articles published by the ACCA examining team or some of the freelancers in UK. So we believe that class, by downloading all these articles, and if you can spend time reading the articles, that's definitely value added, all right, to most of you. Okay, so remember, practicing the past exam questions and referring to the model answer does help a lot in passing your APM examination. Okay, now so class, so what happened is that we are going now to start looking at the question. Now, of course, we will start off with the section A exam questions, because I believe by spending time looking at case studies, now it's good for us to actually revise on all different parts of the syllabus. So now for us, let's move on to the very first question, and let's have a look at it now.